Jacqueline, how are you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Which wonderful part of the world are you at, and why is the weather in your part of the world better than here in Seattle?
I'm in Dallas and it is currently, as we're recording, April 25th, which is the best day of the year, according to Miss Congeniality. Um, it
Really? I didn't
is.
know that.
Yep. It's, not too hot, not too cold.
Just
But
right.
exactly. But to be
The
fair, our
Goldilocks, the Goldilocks scenario.
spring in Dallas is amazing. Summer, not so much.
That's awesome. Jacqueline, you and I started talking about a couple of weeks ago, maybe a little over a month ago, and the interesting point that you made that made me trigger a comment, and then we started talking a lot more, was about analysts. Now, these
Mm,
are industry analysts such as your Gartners and Forresters of the world. So before we go into that, give us a 2 minute background on your background so folks get a little bit of a
sure.
context. You've done a lot of very good things in your career. You've been successful at such a young age. I'm probably twice your age, but still, I feel like you've accomplished a lot more. Walk us through your background.
Sure. I've got a little bit of experience doing everything. It's funny, my name is Jacqueline, and I went by Jack of all trades. And in college, when I was getting my resume, edited by the Career Resource Center, they did not appreciate the Jack with the JACQ. They thought I would show I am illiterate and can't spell. Little did they know. But to that point, I've been working with startups from seed to Series F throughout my entire experience of working. I was the fifth marketing hire at WeWork. I founded the marketing operations team, built out the entire tech stack and roadmap for the Grammarly team as they transition from a traditional B2C to a B2C to B company, standing up both the B2B and the intersection of the two.
Yeah,
And so a lot of fun, a lot of data. And since then, a little over a year ago, I started my own company called Monarch. And so I provide fractional consulting services on MarTech, MarOps, and go-to-market. Best
that's
practices,
awesome.
approaches, and you name it.
That's a great background. Grammarly. Oh man, I see the ads and I'm so excited because I use Grammarly.
Good.
I like the product. Uh, I used to be a WeWork customer as well for about a year or two, and then they shut down the co-working facility next to me. I'm like, okay, all right, I don't need it anymore. So,
That's fair.
oh well, it is what it is. But terrific. Okay, so one of the things that is fascinating that a lot of people have asked us about, especially most of the people. So, give you a context on the background of my podcast, right? The podcast is about 30,000 people, something in that range. That are about 60% of them are individual contributors. They're either entrepreneurs or they're growth marketing people, or they're product marketing people, or they are demand generation, lead generation, right? 10% of them are executives at larger companies. Most of the
Mhm.
10% who's executives, I've strong armed them into listening to my podcast. Otherwise, they wouldn't do it, right? Because I've worked with them
Understood.
before. I will hound them. They will rather subscribe to the podcast, not hear from me, and listen to the podcast. Otherwise, I'm just going to get on their case.
I'm gonna have to take up some best practices from you because I'm about to start a
Hounding?
podcast.
Yeah, hounding works all the time. But yeah, it seems to work. It seems to work. But okay, so we started talking about analysts. Now, give us a little bit of a history. Now, this is not a new phenomenon. Analysts such as
Correct.
Gartner and Forrester claim to be the gatekeepers to the enterprise. And now, increasingly, they're also talking about them being gatekeepers to mid-market. Give us your perspective. You worked with them before. I'm not sure that much at WeWork, but you've had enough experiences with these. And your point in that message was doesn't seem to be working as what we would think it would work anymore. Walk us through your point of view on that one.
Yeah, I've got a lot of thoughts and comments on this, but we also need to include IDC if we're speaking about kind of the big
That's true.
firms
That's true.
out there.
And there are a whole
But
host of smaller ones as well, correct? Those three are
correct.
the big ones, the big cheese, and then you have a whole
Yes,
bunch of smaller
for
people as
sure.
well.
Yes, like the Real Story Group, you name it. There's a lot of practitioners and firms out there. But to kind of give a quick and dirty, the when you're an executive, when you're a team, you're looking to see what best practices are, what's industry standard. And back in the day, when technology was not growing as quickly, as swiftly, I mean, just think how much change has happened since November 2021 with OpenAI and ChatGPT, how entire infrastructures of business have changed. That technological shift has meant anyone who is not on their finger on the pulse right here, right now, this month, they're already behind. And so it just further showed the gap of analyst firms like Gartner, like IDC, like Forrester, of just how far behind they are in their research. And all of this is to say they do good research. However, it is not thorough enough for what they're claiming to be, in my personal opinion.
Let me walk through some things that I've had in my mind and correct me whichever assumptions I have are incorrect. Now, back in 2005 to 2015, when I used to run more B2B stuff, right?
Mhm.
Marketing for product marketing, etc. The analyst firms do two things. They have two customers, so to speak. They have the vendors on one side, and then they call them customers, I guess, or they call them sell side, buy side, whatever they call them. So
Yeah,
these are CIOs, CMOs, like larger companies that want to know what the best practices are.
correct.
So these big companies come to the Gartner analyst or Forrester or IDC and say, hey, what's happening in the industry? Right? And these people who are industry analysts are presumably talking to a lot of different companies and
Yes.
synthesizing that and saying, you should make your button on this page green. That's the best practice. And on this page, the font should be 14 point or something like that. I'm being facetious because it's funny.
Yeah, of
And on
course.
the flip side, they go to the vendors and they are trying to collect information and they do these magic quadrants, or that's the bone
Hmm.
of contention for everybody. For 10 years, that has been a bone of contention. So we're going to walk through that as well. But how do they make money? Most of these people, nearly 60% of Gartner's money is events. It's not advice, it's not research.
You say that. And so I won't directly say it's pay to play because it's not officially pay to play. However, I think about it in indirect payment form. So, one, to subscribe to receive certain aspects of reports, you have to be that customer, as you were alluding. You have to be able to gain access, and that has a high cost. It's not something to, you know, it's not a quick little membership, to say the least, to be able to understand what the metrics are, what price differentials are within different brackets of categories of tech. Not only is there that, but if you think about the companies who consistently make those lists or are most likely to enter into the lists, they have invested headcount to a dedicated analyst, investor relations analyst. And this is not to discredit or devalue those roles because they have a purpose and they're very good at them. But if you're, we'll just do an easy amount and say you have a salary of $100,000, that in and of itself is an indirect payment going into even attempting to be part of the pool Gartner chooses. And to be fair, there are instances where folks do not actively pursue being on a quadrant and they show up. But compared to who's typically the leader of the pack, it is just a vastly different experience, a vastly different demographic. And to that point, if we're thinking of the C suite and they don't have experience with these tools, I find there's great value in asking your team members to do the work, do the research. Why would you outsource that type of knowledge to those who are not in the best interest of your explicit needs, your explicit requirements, and instead you're choosing a brand, which, yes, I wear Nikes, I have very narrow feet, but also Adidas's are pretty great.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean I wouldn't avoid getting an Adidas pair just because I have narrow feet. And so and that's not to say every tool is the same because they're not. There are very stark differences, benefits, pros and cons, and this is every category. And I'm not even talking about just MarTech. That's where my specialty, my specific skill set is in, and so I will only speak in that space. But the rollout of the CDP quadrant this year was fascinating. It's the second year, and it also took them 4 years to even roll out a CDP quadrant. I mean, they also said 10 years ago personalization wasn't going to exist in 2025. And so there's a lot of interesting perspectives that, one, you can't make all the right moves, you can't predict everything correctly, but also why predict when you just don't have any reason to back up your thoughts and your commentary. And I understand that's the business model. And I do see value of a quadrant, but they need to be updated monthly. It's more of like needs to be a stock ticker price as opposed to an annual evaluation of what happened last year in the last 12 months, if that makes sense.
Let me walk through. There's so much to unpack in what you said. There's so much to unpack. Okay. Step number one, MarTech overall, Jacqueline, has 15,000 vendors,
To
right? So
say the least.
there's tons of vendors. Okay. So then you break it down and saying, let's look at different categories. The category you picked, and I love the category, is CDP, Customer Data Platform. So
Yes.
Customer Data Platform is I'm going to explain it just so that folks get a sense of it. A lot of marketing people get data in so many different silos, right? They get it in their CRM system, they get some website data, they get some advertising data, and they get some on website, they get user tracking, eye tracking data, they get a ton of data. They want to pull and transaction data, who's buying what, when win-loss data, all of that data they want to put into a system and be able to do analytics on top of that. Number one, they want to bring all that to make sure that they are privacy controlled and everything else. And then they want to activate it. What that means, I think, to a certain extent, is I want to take decisions based on that data so I can put a campaign together. Okay, so
Right.
this is the CDP space, so to speak. The CDP space, Jacqueline, has about 250, 300 different vendors. Given that overall, Martech has 150 or 15,000 vendors, CDP has 250. Hey, Jacqueline, how many of them made it to the CDP Magic Quadrant on Gartner's, that document, the Magic Quadrant, Gartner's Magic Quadrant?
That is a good question. Do you mind if I look it up?
Feel free. I know what the answer is. 16.
Is it? Okay.
16 out of
16.
250.
All right.
Who do you think those 16 are, and why did they make it to that list? How did you pick 16? Why not 15?
Right.
Why not 20? Why not 10?
Why
Why would you
not
pick 16?
200? Why
Yeah,
not put
why not
everyone
all of
on
them?
plot everyone?
Yeah, why
Uh,
not?
and I recognize and understand the significance of the requirements and how things change, of they need to hit certain revenue goals, et cetera, et cetera. I recognize needing to not make the muddy waters muddier. However, we're dealing with muddy waters. And I understand the need to want to bring clarity and not be so disillusioned as to what is every single one of these tools, what do they provide. And that's also an instance where I find their understanding of CDP is no longer in relation to the market as it is. So the absolute ignorance and or chosen ignorance to avoid composable CDPs. Not only is that where the market is at right now, but that is, I've been screaming it from the rooftops for about 2 years, and I'm glad the world's finally catching up. But that is where the future is going. And it's interesting as you describe what a CDP and defined what it is. Very few actually, one, know what it is, and two, agree on the same definition.
Mm,
I mean,
mm.
I've been in demos with, we'll just say some of the bigger names on that list. Um, and at the end of that demo, me knowing what a CDP is came out of the demo saying, I have no clue what I was just presented. Not only was it smoke and mirrors, I didn't understand what was even on the screen.
Yeah.
And one, that is not how you want to leave any sort of demo of you're trying to purchase this very expensive product. But I was also thinking, and this is where Composable for me, once I found out about it, changed my entire understanding of how we can activate data. And why would you pay for those same events or those same data points that you already have in your data warehouse? Why would you pay double for that storage? That is just like where my brain goes in terms of optimizing for your MarTech budget and how you make your integrations clean, simple, seamless. Why would you double up on things?
So
And
let's
so that's where my
unpack
head
that.
goes.
Let's
Hmm.
unpack that a little bit. So in the traditional world, there were a lot of CDP companies that would take data, for example, your ad data from Google, LinkedIn, blah, 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 take
Hmm.
SEO data, take website data, take traffic data, and they would replicate, so to speak, bring that data into their own schema. And they had a way to be able to put that schema together. So you had to do a little bit of what in that world we call ETL, which
Hmm.
is extract the data from that system, transform it so that it's consistent, and then load your database or data system with the schema that was right. This was done so you could get analytics on top of it that was consistent. And then you had to do a reverse ETL to take
Hmm.
that data out of the CDP and put it into your email campaigns, for example, or put it into your ad system again. So it's almost as if you're taking something, I don't know if you're doing that much with it, but then you're putting it back again. It's as if someone took chocolate from you from Belgium, flattened it, put it in a mold, and sold it to you for a 150% markup.
That sounds like Nestle.
But I would think Nestle does a little bit of value add. For example, they might add, I don't even know. Actually, I'm going to question that right now, right?
Yeah,
I
go
love
for it.
chocolate, by the way.
Me
I'm going to
too.
question I'm going to question the fact that you need a CDP. And you talked about composable. Unpack that, because I don't think 90% of people who are listening to my podcast know an understanding
Yeah,
of composable versus not. They probably heard of it because in the context of e-commerce, there are composable e-commerce systems and there are headless e-commerce systems. But
right.
composable, does that mean that you can actually, you walk us through it? What does composable mean? Why is composable CDP a big thing?
Yeah. For me, we've already kind of discussed the storage piece, but for me, composable is you can create the segments, you can navigate your own existing data without the need of SQL queries. You can bring the power and empower back your marketing team as a starting point. But what I love about composable and that entire definition is it doesn't limit yourself to marketing. And CDPs up until this point have only really brought value for identity resolution, data streams, and event tracking, and creating certain segments for said marketers. And there is value, but very few times is it actually being managed. Very few times is it actually being maintained. Is there a dedicated person to it? It in and of itself is a whole job. And it's true of any tool. And this is not MarTech specific of the implementation matters, the way you actually adopt it and maintain and keep hygiene, all is important. And so the beauty of composable is if you're pulling in, so we've discussed kind of reverse ETL, so you're bringing your data elsewhere, so bringing it from the warehouse somewhere else and extracting it. What what beauty is there if you don't know how to leverage it? And so you empower marketers to use the equivalent of a WYSIWYG. You know, what you see is what you get, drag and drop segmentation.
Yeah,
But what I'm particularly bullish on composable CDPs is yes, all of the above, the historical purpose and reason is there, but it also makes your engineers' lives easier. It makes your product life easier. When I was at both Grammarly and at WeWork, we brought in Fivetran. And at Grammarly, I was the reason we brought in Fivetran because we didn't have any of our marketing data in our data warehouse.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
We and I was like, that not only is that unacceptable, but that means we're not actually actioning on this huge marketing spend and budget we're spending per year. We're leaving so much money on the table. So that was my first step. Within my first 3 months, we brought on Fivetran. That was my first big project. Once again, not exactly MarOps specific, but I was like, you know what? The data engineers are going to be my best friends because we have to get this to work. And thankfully, once I proved the business case to engineering team, they recognize, oh, we don't have to build these pipelines. This is easy. So great, we've got the data and your Databricks, your Snowflake, your Redshift, doesn't matter what it is, as long as it exists somewhere. Uh,
Yeah.
um, but then it's like, okay, great. Now our analysts can do some work based off of attributing certain things, but what if we want to action upon it next? And so that's where that concept of a reverse ETL comes into play of great, we've done all of these queries, we've created all these different reports in our data warehouse, but how do we actually action upon it? And so that's where the thinking of a reverse ETL originally comes into play of great, you've got this data, let's send it to your email marketing platform, your SMS, your CRM. It doesn't matter what
Right, right.
end
Wherever
end
you need to
destination.
activate it.
Exactly, where you want to activate it and how you want to use it. Same with Google Ads, paid spend, everything you name it. And so that's where tools like HighTouch, Census, Growth Loops, you name it, have really cornered the market because they started off in one direction, which was just giving that data to action upon it. And then since then have created new features and aspects where it is leaning more towards that traditional CDP without the cost, with the flexibility and with the enablement, where great, not only do you not have to build, your engineers don't have to build a pipeline, you don't have to build it towards as well. And you have your product data, you can action upon it. And for B2C to B companies in particular, where you've got your CRM, you've got a lifecycle marketing tool, and also a demand generation tool for sales and lead gen, you
Yeah,
can action upon your product signals and your actual product usage. And instead of having to look in three different places, you can send it directly to Salesforce or your HubSpot
absolutely.
instance. And so not only can you really familiarize every aspect of the team. You know, I've talked about engineers, product, and marketing, but now you're bringing in sales. You're bringing net value to every aspect of the business. But then we haven't even talked about the simplicity of segmentation. And if we're, Grammarly is an easy example just because everyone's very familiar. You've got the free tier, you've got the premium tier, and then your business. There's some more complexity, but we'll keep it very straightforward. Just with those three segments alone, you all of a sudden have all your suppression lists and your active subscriber lists. So you already
And you
know for,
have subsegments within those as well, right? It's not just at
oh,
a
of
simple high
course,
level. I mean, there are millions of users. You can't just segment by 1 million users a segment.
of course. But if we think about just those three segments, free, premium,
Yeah,
and business,
enterprise. Yeah,
now, yeah, enterprise business, you have from a paid ad spend perspective, you officially now up to every minute or every second, you don't need to do it that quickly. Every 4 hours is 6 hours, 8 hours is totally fine to schedule it like that. But you have a constant updated suppression or actual audience list to be sending to your paid spend platforms, to Google Ads, to Facebook, to LinkedIn, whatever it may be. And as a result, you're able to save, if you're dealing with a triple digit, 9-digit budget, that pays for itself 10 times over in the first month. And there's actually a case study just came out with the Grammarly team in High Touch built upon the work I did when I was there. And so it's very exciting to see it like come to fruition now.
right.
Um,
Absolutely.
but that's the beauty of you can save so much money where you're already spending a lot of money. And it's just having unified definitions, which you would think you have those at your company. But when you start talking to every different team and how they pull their lists or their SQL queries are set up, you come to learn there's some filters that were included or not included that should be. And so then you can really streamline. So everyone is talking about the exact same individuals all throughout your funnel.
Awesome, Jacqueline. I think that's what we have the time for right now because I know my audience, they are doing a cardio based on my podcast. They're running on 1.5 speed of my podcast. This was terrific. Thank you so much for the time. We're going to have you back because there's so much more to unpack. But
So much
terrific
more.
talking to you. Thank you so much.